Hi, I'm Ernie Conover. Welcome back to my shop. In the last episode of building a shaker candle box with hand tools pretty much, we completed our box with the only thing left to do is put our hinges on, either staple hinges or true leaf hinges. I explained how to do that in the following question and answer period that we did over Zoom. We installed the bottom in our box in the traditional shaker way for candle boxes, and that was simply to cut a piece of wood that was 3/8 of an inch thick that was a loose fitting with the inside of the box. We then drove 4 finish nails through to hold it in place. And this is the way the shakers would do it. They also used another method in which they simply cut a piece of wood that was the outside dimension of the box and nailed that in place, and you would have seen a bottom that looked like that. Because the box is so small, we do not have to worry about wood movement. There won't be enough that it amounts to anything. However, in bigger boxes, we do have to worry about wood movement. Wood is hygroscopic and it absorbs and loses water with changes in humidity, which happens daily in most regions. And as the humidity goes up, this board will get wider across the grain, but it will not change at all along the grain. We can take it to be 0 for cabinet making purposes. However, the fact that it's getting wider and also thicker or thinner as the humidity goes down, we have to allow for this if the piece is not to destroy itself because of wood movement. The traditional way to do that is to put a floating panel in the piece in a groove that runs around the inside. And here's a box we did 2 years ago. And it solves this problem by putting this panel in a floating 1/4 inch groove. And you always cut a groove its width from the edge. So a 1/4 inch groove goes a 1/4 inch from the edge. And that's why I had you cut the half pins less than 1/4 of an inch wide so that you could plow the groove in the pin board without having the pin interfere with it. However, the matching tail board, to cut the groove in that, you would have to what's called stop the groove about 1/8 of an inch from the end of the tail. And that is problematic with hand tools. You would have had to chop that groove with a mortise chisel, which would take probably 10 minutes per end of the candle box. Kind of slow, much slower than a plane. So an alternate scheme that I don't know when it was worked out, but it works great, is to cut the pins to half the thickness of the material you're working in. This is about 1/2 inch material, so we cut the pins to just a bit over 1/4 inch here. So we then rabbeted the tailboard, as you can see here, so that this actually sticks a 1/4 of an inch inside the opening. So you have to increase the length of your pin boards by whatever the thickness of the material is. You would have had to add a 1/2 inch to the length of this to get the right inside dimension. Not a big deal, but it has to be allowed for. I thought it would be fun to now turn around and build another candle box using this scheme. And so I thought we'd bring this all around home by doing that. I have another set of fronts and backs and sides, and I've cut the pin boards to the same layout scheme that I showed you in episode 1. However, I've only cut the length to a little over half the thickness of the material. And I've rabbeted out one of the two end pieces to half its thickness. And as you can see, we now transfer that information over and cut these tails the same way we did last time. But now that rabbet will stick inside the box and it will decrease the length of the candle we can put in that box by 3/8 of an inch, because we'd be taking 3/16 off of each end. So I will rabbet out this other board and I'll show you how we use a rabbet plane to do that. All right, we have this piece which we did before. I'm going to now dog this piece in my vise and have it just slightly overhanging the edge of my bench here. I'll take a marking gauge and strike a gauge line across this inside face. And now I'll take a rabbeting plane. This is a beautiful late 19th century version of a unhandled rabbeting plane. This was a very, very common tool in the past. This one is nice in that it has a skewed iron right here and a beautiful depth stop that's adjustable by this wing nut on the top. And the first thing I do is drag it backwards across the work, because it has a little scoring knife right here, which cuts the wood ahead of this main cutter and gives you a nice clean breakout, which is also why I put that scratch line in there with the marking gauge. And there we have a beautiful start. And now I just keep going across the grain. This even tends to break out on this side beautifully because it has a skewed iron. That skew also pulls this plane into the rabbet. They also made them with straight irons that were straight across, that is, they're a right angle to the sole of the plane. And for those, you need to often put a piece of scrap wood clamped in here on this side that prevents that from being broken out. Now the nice thing about these planes is once it reaches that depth stop, it just stops cutting. I have a beautiful, nice square rabbet. I really don't need to do anything further to it. Sometimes your rabbet isn't all it could be, that if you're not steady with the plane, you sometimes get a ragged shoulder here that will slant or not be correct. You can always come in with a shoulder rabbet plane, which is a necessary tool if you hand cut mortise and tenon joints. And that will just clean that up, make a perfectly square corner very, very easily. Nice plane to have. I have for years combed flea markets and sales and even gone to antique tool dealers to get these beautiful planes like this. They're becoming increasingly hard to find, but there are some great alternatives. One is the Veritas rabbeting plane, which has a skewed iron, a depth stop, and a nicker that cuts ahead. So this would do this job very nicely as well. All right, we'll now transfer our marks over the same way we did last time, and we will simply take, line up our triangles, and these would go here like this. And you cannot mark from the inside in this rabbeted version of the dovetail. So we have to do it from the outside, and we have to be a bit careful that we don't follow the grain of the wood. And again, putting a little chalk in here so you can see your lines a little bit better is always good insurance. We have our layout lines, and we're going to cut this just like we did the last one, from the inside of the carcass. And we stop right at that rabbet. And now remembering what we're keeping these, the tails, and we're throwing this away, scribbling that waste. It's always a good idea, except I should have done it before I sawed. Always a good idea to put hearing protection on it anytime you're banging. A lot of these taps are well over 100 decibels, and it is cumulative. They will affect your hearing eventually. So we're just going to start there like we did before and go right through these like a stair stack. You don't have to go very far with this. That's it right there. That one we're going to saw out that one. All right, I'm going to turn these over. Make sure I have no chips here. Stair stack. Now, right on the edge line. When you're doing bigger ones of these, it's often good to cut a slice of wood that's the height, depth of your rabbet that you put under here as a backer block as you cut through here. It makes these go a little smoother. We have all our intermediate pin sockets cut. Now it's just a matter of trimming off these half pins right here. And I do it on these type of dovetails from the outside because my saw breaks out better. And I'll take a paring chisel and clean up these walls. It's now time to plow the groove when we use a plow plane for that. I used this one at the beginning of this video, but for this one I'm going to use their larger combination plane. I have taken the second skate out. The second skate allows you to adjust the sides of this plane to any cutter that you want to use, so you can actually rabbet with this plane. And it has a micro adjustable fence, which is a very nice feature. So I'm going to take my trusty marking gauge that is a linchpin of my bench, set it for 1/4 of an inch. Looking at our triangle, we want to put our groove in the bottom of the box, so it's best that you do it on the opposite side of the triangle. And like the other time with the first box we made, you could turn the box over and make either side the top. You're pretty well stuck with your layout here. Top of the box. Now with this micro adjustment, I can dial this right into where I want it. It's where I want to be. And I can lock that in with these 2 little locking screws. So again, when you start plow planes, you work backwards in small increments. Now, again, paraffin wax always makes all these planes work better. I have the depth stop set to about the right amount. Now you can see how we plowed right by those half pins. Didn't cause any problem. And this is over that pin, or over that tail, I'm sorry. And we're good to go. We'll do a trial fit here. And there, you can see how the grooves line up beautifully. I'll cut a bottom to 1/4 inch thick, and we'll look about how we get that in there and glue this together. It's about the same as the other one. I've got all my pieces now here fitted, rabbeted, ready to go. I'll set them out as they should go. And I've got my bottom now milled, planed up smooth on both sides, fitted. I took my little plane and broke all the corners so that it wouldn't hang up in the groove. I also took my sanding block and chamfered all these corners so they wouldn't hang up as this goes together. It just doesn't have an excuse for not going together right. So without further ado, I'll walk over and get the hide glue off the fire over there. And we'll start getting all these pieces ready by just putting a little glue on all our exposed pins here. Now we'll start putting this together. We've got our dovetail right there. Our carpenter's triangles line up. Now I'll get the bottom out and I'll put that in place like that. Carpenter's triangles all line up here. And you can see how I could actually slide that bottom right out. Everything lines up beautifully because we worked to our gauge lines. We trusted our layout. I hope everybody has appreciated the fact that the layout is, following the layout is really important here. It's kind of like Star Wars. Luke, trust the layout. And if you lay out correctly and cut to the line, everything will come out pretty good. Now I showed you how to make clamping culls, but on a small box like this, I can actually just clamp this in the middle and get away with it. I wanted to have you have the exercise of making clamping culls. With hot glue, you actually tighten your clamps and wait about 15 minutes and tighten them a little bit more because the glue gels as you go together and it relaxes a little, and you can then give it another little crank and it'll come up a little more. With cold glues, you don't do that. So 12 hours, we'll get out the planes and clean this box up the same way we did the last one. But we now, in this box, have a floating bottom in here that actually is a little loose. I can move it around a little in there. And it will fit today, tomorrow, next week, next year, a century from now. This is Ernie Conover saying thanks for visiting my shop again.